All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And Martyn, how good was it to watch England get that win over the weekend?
It was tremendous, actually. I was delighted. It would have been even better if they played the game on Saturday, Jake, because Sunday's our production day at League Express, so I had to sort of watch the game while also, putting the paper together with everybody here in the office. So I'm very glad to say that this weekend's game is at Headingley on Saturday, so I will be able to get to it and watch it actually in the flesh, so to speak. So I'm looking forward to that. But yes, it was a great, I was going to say great performance. Was it a great performance by England? It was certainly a good performance. I'm not sure whether it was great, and Shaun Wane seems to think that it wasn't, to judge from his post-match comments. But it was certainly good enough to beat the Samoans by 16 points, 34-18. And that 16-point lead was established right in the first 20 minutes, wasn't it? So, England broke away and got into a lead. The Samoans were giving away penalties and giving away set restarts. I think they struggled to come to terms with the English referee, Liam Moore, and I'd be very surprised if this week they haven't had some sessions with English referees to sort of come to terms a little bit more with the way that the game is going to be refereed. So they will be dangerous still. But I think the Samoans missed Stephen Crichton, the great centre who got married a week or two before the tour started. They would have benefited from having him in the side, and England took advantage of his absence, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to see, obviously, England back and playing well. But as you said, I think there is a little bit of room for them to still improve. And
yes.
I think that sort of goes back to Shaun Wane's comments post-match. I think he was happy with the performance, but he made a comment that, it's still probably not good enough to go agat the Kiwis
this wouldn't
or
beat
Australia.
No,
Yeah.
he made that point very forcefully, actually. And he's probably right, but fortunately it was good enough to beat Samoa, and hopefully will be good enough to beat them again this weekend. And within that, there were some very fine performances. We were saying before the podcast started that Herbie Farnworth, is developing so well, isn't he, as a player, as an international player, as well as a club player with the Dolphins in the NRL.
Yeah, absolutely. His running game, he just busting, breaking through tackles. He had his hand there in a few of the tries, scored one himself. That one, I think, where was it? Did he score it when Victor Radley got that little flick pass away to him?
Yes, it was Victor Radley who he flicked it to. Yes,
that
brilliant.
was a great link up between
I thought
those
Victor
two.
Radley played very well as well, incidentally. To say that he obviously is the what you might call the token Australian in the pack. That's probably not a very fair description, though, is it? But, he is a heritage player as opposed to somebody who was born here and has played in Super League. But I think there are quite a few. It was interesting, actually, watching the game and sort of thinking how you'd watch it if you were a club representative. And I think there would have been several club representatives watching that game and thinking about who they'd like to sign from both sides, actually. Principally Herbie Farnworth. I would be amazed, Jake, quote me if I'm proved to be wrong on this, but I would be astonished if Wigan were not in Herbie Farnworth's ear about taking up a contract with Wigan, perhaps when or even before his current contract with the Dolphins expires. He's in a way the one that got away from Wigan, and he'd be a terrific attraction at the DW Stadium. Well, not the DW Stadium now, it's the Brick Community Stadium. He'd be a terrific attraction for Wigan fans, playing alongside Jake Wardle. I just had to think of his name then. But playing alongside Jake Wardle in the centre, that would be a devastating centre partnership, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And who knows, if he's able to win a premiership with the Dolphins in the next few years, maybe he does come back
Well, you never know.
rather than later.
You never know, but he does seem to enjoy life in Australia, doesn't he? He's you've got to pay him enormous credit the way that he's went over there as a kid and determined to force his way into the Broncos initially, and then obviously moving to the Dolphins for 2024. It's been, an incredible journey for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a Broncos fan, just watching the way the Broncos performed this year, his departure was definitely felt, I think, for the Broncos.
Absolutely,
he makes
yes.
so much good ground coming out of out of trouble, coming out of their own end, and he's just proved on the weekend why he's probably one of the best centres in the world at the moment. And,
Yes.
So much room for improvement as well. He'll only get bigger and better.
Oh,
from here.
there's no doubt about it. And it's interesting, isn't it, to speculate on how the England team might change for the second test. I mean, the one obvious change, I suppose, is that Luke Thompson will be available for this game, having served his suspension. And I suspect he might replace Ethan Havard in the front row.
Yeah.
So, that's my tip as probably being the only change. I mean, some people were a bit surprised to see Junior Nsemba left out of the 17. But again, difficult to know whether Shaun Wane would want to change a winning side, apart from perhaps bringing Luke Thompson in to strengthen it as he would see it. So I don't know whether Junior Nsemba might have to wait, another year for his England debut, or whether he will actually get in this weekend. Whatever happens, I'm sure he'd do a great job if he were selected.
Yeah, it's sort of looking at it from Wayne's mindset, or from his perspective. It's a case of, do you want to win the series 2-0 and put your strongest team on the park, or do you want to look to build for next year's Ashes series or the World Cup?
My guess is that Shaun will want to win the series and put his strongest team on the park, and he'll want to banish the memory of that World Cup semi-final from a couple of years ago. I've no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Shaun is a very emotional guy, and he actually loves winning. He loves winning more than he loves experimenting, I think. I think that's what we'll see this weekend.
And I guess looking at Samoa, they might make some changes ahead of this weekend. But do you think now that they've had that run under their belt, they'll be better for it next?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. We saw that, didn't we, in the World Cup a couple of years ago? They came and they were very much underdone for that first game at Newcastle. They lost by 60 points to 6, and then recovered enough to beat us in the semi-final at Arsenal's Emirates Stadium. I don't think there'll be that degree of improvement in them this time, but obviously they don't need it. Let's face it, what we have to remember is that in the last 60 minutes of the game on Sunday, the scoreline was 18-all. So, if that carries on for the next 80 minutes of the game this Saturday, then, it's going to be a very, very competitive game. And let's not underestimate the Samoans, as we did a couple of years ago. And, let's make sure that England are fully prepared for what will be a real strong Samoan test, to be honest.
And the other thing too is, I think Samoa looked most dangerous when they were throwing the ball around off the cuff.
Very
rugby.
much so.
And
well, they scored an absolutely brilliant try, didn't they? Where they just kept the ball alive. Jerome Luai was involved in a couple of times in that move, and the eventual scorer was Dean Mariner. It was his second try, and that we made that the try of the week, actually, in League Express, because clearly it was an absolute thriller. And if they can do it once, they can do it again, Jake. So, let's... And it was great to watch. Let's look forward to more moves like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I guess one positive I think Wayne could probably take out of this is that, two of Samoa's tries were intercept tries, so the scoreline could have been much worse if they just had played a bit more protective. Now, the pre-match drama, controversy around the Sivo towel, the head contact there between Mikey Lewis and Gordon Chan Kum Tong.
Was that controversial? Well, I mean, it just sets the scene, doesn't it? And
we love drama.
Yeah, of course we do. And that's the the South Pacific nations, really add a touch of theatre to the event, don't they? By their various pre-match rituals, and it was fabulous to see, and it didn't. There's always this sort of feeling that, is it going to break out into a fist fight or something before the game even starts? Yeah. And it never does, of course. It's just ridiculous. But no, I thought it was great to see. I love the sippy towel of the Samoans, and we'll look to it again. The only thing that gets me though about that. The pre-game ritual that they have, and this applies to New Zealand and all the sides who do it. They put so much energy into it, into really making it a fearsome challenge to the host nation, that I wonder whether it actually takes some energy out of them. You know, and you sometimes find that, you know, they start the game almost as though they're a bit lacking in energy in the first few minutes because they've put so much into the ritual, you know, war dance. And I mean, they're always going to do it, so it'll never change. But you do have that feeling that if you attack them early on, they might still be in that mindset of performing the ritual rather than having adjusted to the actual game on the field. So I don't know. You know, maybe I'm just maybe that's not correct. I'm not quite so sure. But I've always suspected that, you know, it's quite a big effort for those players. They really take it seriously, and it's wonderful to see. But it just takes a bit out of them.
Absolutely, and I think every player prepares differently. There's players that like to get really amped and psyched up before they run onto the pitch, and then there's players that like to be nice and calm and you know,
every
relax as they
different.
go on. So I'm sure it definitely impacts different players differently.
Absolutely.
Now let's talk about the crowd attendance, mate. I think there was about 15,000 at Wigan over the weekend.
15,137. I was a bit disappointed with that, really. You know, I mean, the Wigan Stadium holds 25,000. I'd been hoping they'd get a bit nearer to 20. I think the Headingley game this weekend will have a better attendance, actually. I think more tickets have been sold, and I'm pretty sure that it will it will come near to selling out. It would be great to see a stadium full for an international game. But having said that, you know, you've got to say that in the old days, it just used to be Australia that could fill a stadium. Then gradually New Zealand got closer and closer when they would come over. And Tonga last year, they didn't. They sold quite badly, actually, the Tonga Test matches. And already the Samoan one, the first Samoan Test, has sold better than the Tonga Test last year. Okay. And that's great to see, isn't it? And, you know, I think as people get used to seeing the Tongans and Samoans and perhaps even the Fijians and the, you know, Kumuls, the Papua New Guineans, coming across to play test matches, it's all adding to Rugby League's international profile. Yeah. And I think that's wonderful. And, you know, the great thing was that on Sunday night on the news channels and the sports channels, or at least most of them, you know, there were tries being shown from this game, and it was, you know, great to get that publicity, and hopefully it will, you know, get bigger as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. And all you have to do is, when you look at that Samoan team list, there's a lot of stars on that side. You just hope that they can gel and get it together before this weekend.
Oh, yes. We'll I mean, we want them to give us a... the thing that struck me, and I've written about it in League Express, was that, in a sense, from the point of view of the atmosphere at the game, the worst thing that could have happened was what did happen, and that is England, you know, running out to a big early lead. The crowd sort of then sat back and didn't, you know, England were always going to win it, I suppose, in the minds of most people in the crowd. So they didn't get desperately excited until, you know, the 2 minutes from the end, when there was a bit of a scuffle, when all the players sort of ran in and started pulling each other around a bit. And the crowd got animated then, but they didn't get very animated much before that. My hope was that Samoa would take a significant early lead and then England would fight back and win the game and the crowd would get behind them, but that's not quite the way it happened. Yeah,
and I guess when you look at this first matchup compared to the World Cup one, it's not as big of a scoreline as that first World Cup match, is it? So hopefully we'll see some improvement. One thing I will say in defence of the Samoans, just looking at their team list, a lot of these boys haven't played football since early September when the regular season ended.
That's right.
So it's not just that lack of consistency in playing together, it's that match fitness as well. So I think they'll be better for it this weekend.
Well, again, something I wrote in League Express this week was if you go back to the old style tours, when Australia and New Zealand used to come and used to stay here for about 3 months or so, you know, all together, they would always play about 6 games before the first test against club sides. And they would always, you know, work out their rustiness and so on. They'd work out their jet lag, you know, by playing club teams who they were probably confident of being able to beat before the first test came up, often at Headingley or wherever, at Wigan or wherever it might be. And by the time that happened, they were really sharp and ready to go. Whereas in the modern day, they come over and, 8 or 9 days after they arrive, they're playing the first test. Well, they're bound to still be, not quite coordinated, aren't they? Let's face it. It's a very short period to prepare. And the home side, when one side's travelling to the other side of the world, the home side will always have a massive advantage, in my opinion, when you play a game so soon after the visiting side arrives.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to touch on this match before we move on to the other games?
Well, just one thing that struck me. I mean, the England team. It's quite interesting, isn't it? There will have been a lot of eyes on the England team from down under, because of course there's every prospect that the NRL is going to grow in number from its current 17 to 18, 19 and even 20 teams in the near future. And I think a lot of Australian clubs will have been watching players like Harry Smith and Jack Welsby and so on, and even Harry Newman, and thinking, well, those guys might well be people we might approach when we're putting a team together to enter the NRL. And certainly, I can imagine a lot of players in the England team will have done themselves quite a bit of good in terms of, possibly attracting offers from down under.
Maybe that's why Nsemba hasn't gotten a match yet.
Well, maybe.
Shaun Wane's like, we'll keep him at Wigan. We won't give him that exposure in front of the NRL
Well,
scouts.
maybe, but they won't be able to hide him for much longer, will they? Let's face it. Yeah,
that's right.
I'm sure they know all about him already.
Yeah.
So I think you're attributing very Machiavellian tactics to Shaun Wane that I'm
maybe.
sure are not there.
Yeah, maybe. The other one too, I was thinking. There's been a bit of talk about whether Liam Marshall will get his start this weekend, but it's so hard when you've got Dom Young
and
you've got Matty Ashton, who killed it on the weekend.
And we had a piece with Liam Marshall in League Express this week, more or less saying that that he's almost resigned to not being selected because the two wingers are playing so well. And it was great to see Dom Young playing, by the way, after his big disappointment last year when he came over for the Tongan test and then had a real health problem that put him in hospital for several days and was a bit of a scare, actually, at the time. Fortunately, fully recovered, of course. So, it's great to see him back. But again, it's interesting when you look at a player like Dom Young. Again, he would be a massive attraction for an English club in Super League wanting a marquee player attraction. I mean, Dom Young is a great kid. He's a great winger. He's very personable, very good-looking young guy. Looks great athlete. A very intelligent kid as well. He'd be a great signing as a marquee signing for any English club, and any club that wants to break the bank to sign him. You see, this is the big difference between the NRL and Super League. The NRL doesn't have a marquee player provision. We've got 3 marquee player potentially slots in Super League clubs. So Herbie Farnworth is a really interesting example. If the NRL had a marquee player provision, I suspect that Herbie Farnworth would never have left Brisbane Broncos to go to the Dolphins. But because they don't have a marquee player provision, they couldn't fit him into their salary cap. So, he had to go elsewhere to find a deal that, accorded with his ability. In this country, you've got a club like Wigan. I think we've said before in this podcast, a club like Wigan with a very wealthy owner, Mark Anston, could, if they wished to, sign the 3 best players in the world and put them on marquee contracts. And there's not much that the NRL could do about it, actually.
That's right.
And I think the NRL is right not to have marquee player slots, actually. But, we the salary cap in England has long since, it was originally intended to be a provision that equalised the competition. It's long stopped being that now.
Yeah. Now, if you were to be the director of rugby at Wigan or someone
Oh,
involved,
gosh,
how much
yes.
would you throw at Herbie Farnworth?
Oh, my goodness. I don't know. Probably $500,000 a year, I would think.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends partly on what he's earning at the Dolphins already, of course. And we're
think-
not sure about that.
Yeah, I think £500,000 would certainly entice someone like him.
Yeah, you'd think so.
That'd be roughly $1 million Australian dollars a year, and I don't
Yes.
think Herbie's quite on that at the moment.
Nathan
so,
Cleary is, isn't he? But not Herbie, I don't think.
Yeah, so maybe that could entice him. We'll see.
Yeah.
see,
Well,
mate.
we'll see.
All right, mate, we'll move on to some of the matches that happened in the Southern Hemisphere. We had the Australians taking on the Kiwis. Australia won that one 22 points to 10 at a fully sold-out venue at Christchurch, I believe.
Yeah,
mate.
17,005 people at the, what's it called? The Apollo Project Stadium in Christchurch. That's an interesting place. It was originally called Rugby League Park, but the major stadium in Christchurch, if you remember, was destroyed a few years ago in the earthquake that affected Christchurch. So they developed that developed Rugby League Park, and Canterbury Crusaders, the rugby union side, started playing there. But it only holds just over 17,000, and it was sold out 2 weeks ago, which was great to see. Great to see a full house. And it was a great game as well. I've watched the whole game. I watched the whole game on Monday, and it was extremely entertaining. Some great performances on both sides, and the Australians deserved to win, but they didn't win easily. And it was Stacey Jones's first game as New Zealand coach, which was really interesting, wasn't it? And I think they did him proud, and I think they'll improve. And they play the Tongans this weekend in the Kiwis' second game, and if they win that, they'll go on to play Australia in the final at Combank Stadium in Parramatta. So, really fine game. I thought one of the kids who caught my eye, actually, Jake, was the young New Zealand fullback Keanu Keeney, who I've not really taken much notice of before. Very young Gold Coast Titans player. But my goodness, he looks to be a real bundle of excitement, I've got to say.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Just electric at the back, very fast as well. And the way he performed over the weekend, you have to think that he's probably locked down that number 1 jersey there for the Kiwis. I know
You think
Chance,
so?
Nickel Klukstar played in the halves.
Yeah.
He's copped a little bit of flack for his performance in the halves.
Well, I mean, it's not really a standoff half, and of course they brought for the last 20 minutes or so they brought Cody Nikorima onto the pitch, who is a standoff half. And I think they looked more threatening when they did that. So whether Stacey Jones will keep Cody Nikorima in the standoff slot, for the next game, we'll find out, of course. But again, another notable performance for New Zealand was Shaun Johnson, who supposedly retired 8 weeks ago when the New Zealand Warriors season came to an end, but looked as though, I think he's 32 now, is he, Shaun Johnson? Yeah. He played as though, he could certainly go around for another year. Yeah. And I've got a bit of advice for a few English clubs who are looking for a halfback, it's get in touch with Shaun Johnson's management and see whether he fancies a year in England.
Yeah.
Because he could certainly deliver the goods for virtually any team in Super League. And again, he'd be a massive name, wouldn't he?
Well, Matt Moylan's announced his retirement at Lee. Maybe Derek Beaumont could get on the phone.
Well, if Derek's watching this podcast, I don't know whether he is, but if he is, that's the advice that I would give.
Yeah, absolutely. The other one, it was great seeing big Lindsay Collins burst through the line and run 20, 25 metres to score the first try. I thought that was outstanding for the front row.
Yeah, he's a good player, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's a really good player.
And then I guess Tom Trbojevic had some great touches. He looks devastating as ever in the centres.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Lomax as well, outstanding on the wing for Australia.
Zach Lomax, he's a fantastic player, isn't he? And although he did get beaten to the punch by the Kiwi winger Will Warbrick, didn't he? When Warbrick very cleverly, took the catch from a Johnson kick and just, almost on a sixpence beat Zach Lomax. But Lomax is a really interesting character, isn't he? He's going to Parramatta this coming season. He doesn't want to play on the wing. yet he's actually a great winger.
Yeah.
I mean, the try he scored on the wing when he went down the right wing and just leaned into the full-back as the full-back was coming to tackle him to make sure he couldn't push him out into touch.
Yeah.
That was just real great play, I thought. I very much underestimated how good that was. It could so easily have been pushed into touch, but used his strength to avoid that fate. And but he's one of those guys, Zach Lomax, apparently, who's really good at virtually every sport.
Yeah.
I was reading something about him. He's good at rugby league, obviously, but as a kid he was great at rugby union, great at Aussie rules, great at soccer, great at cricket, great at swimming. You get some people who are just good at everything. We're so jealous of them, aren't we?
Yeah. He's not the worst looking bloke either, so he's got good looks as well. So he probably does well with the ladies, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure he probably does. But there'll be plenty waiting for him in Parramatta, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yes, a great player and a terrific match.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be good to see, who Australia will face in that final. They obviously get the advantage of a week off heading into that one. So,
the
really
Tongans will give the Kiwis a game, won't they? There's no doubt about it, and they'll be well supported.
Yeah, the atmosphere
in Auckland.
Will be electric.
It will,
imagine.
yes. Yeah.
The other matchup we had Fiji defeating Cook Islands 66-6. A big bounce back win for Fiji after losing to PNG the week before.
Yes.
Probably not surprising when you look at these two teams on paper. Fiji
yes.
definitely have the much better lineup.
Yeah, Michael Jennings scoring a hat-trick for Fiji, and Maika Sivo, who's coming to Leeds next season, he scored a double as well. He's going to be an exciting signing.
Yeah.
And of course, Brad Arthur at Leeds knows him very well, and Sivo has been sort of reported as paying tribute to Brad Arthur and saying that when he phoned him up and suggested coming, it took him about 2 seconds to make his mind up.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
And I think Leeds fans are in for quite a treat next year. But they will have three wingers for two positions because, of course, they've got Ryan Hall coming back from Hull KR and Ash Handley, who's already there, of course, who's a great winger in his own right. So that's going to be an interesting year for Leeds.
Might have to look at maybe moving Ash into the centres, perhaps. Or
maybe, who knows? Yes, because Paul Momirovski's gone back to Australia now.
Yeah, that would still be. That's a great backline if you think about it. If
potentially,
they can keep them together, and Newman, obviously.
Yeah, potentially.
But yeah, I will say, I think we do need to give a bit of credit to the Cook Islands as well, because I read something this week which sort of surprised me. They've only got a population of 13,000 people, the Cook Islands. Now,
yes.
I was thinking we're in Brighouse at the moment.
Yes, yeah.
That's like picking, an international rugby league side from Brighouse. I'm sure Brighouse's population is probably a lot bigger.
Well, Brighouse would beat anybody, I'm sure. But, interesting. I mean, Brighouse Range. There is the Brighouse Rangers rugby league team who are I think playing the Pennine League. But it's funny. I'd love to go to the Cook Islands because it's full of. It's got about 100 islands, most of them unpopulated, over an area the size of India. And yet, as you say, about 13,000 people there.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
It's quite incredible, isn't it?
And they've also got the women's team as well. So I think they've picked two professional international teams from that small population.
And the women's team did a lot better. They only lost 18-6 to Cook Islands. Sorry, they only lost 18-6 to Fiji.
Yeah.
So, it's amazing. And, the Cook Islands punch above their weight. I always remember in the 2013 World Cup, Jake, the Cook Islands, with their population of 13,000, played the United States with their population of about 300 million at Bristol. And I think it turned out to be a draw, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, wow.
So it was, in front of about 8,000 people in Bristol, and we never followed that up, as we never do in rugby league, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, who wouldn't like to visit the Cook Islands? All those beautiful lagoons and Pacific atolls that make up the Cook Islands. Must be fabulous, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we'll pitch a trip over there, mate, and see if they ever play a game of rugby.
I wonder if they ever do play any home games on the Cook Islands.
Yeah,
in Rarotonga, which is the capital.
We're seeing it at Fiji now, so hopefully in a few years' time, we'll see it.
Let's hope.
All right, mate, and we'll just touch on the women's games as well. We had the Gillaroos defeating New Zealand 14 points to 0, which is a tight match.
Yes, and a really, I mean, the Gillaroos are such a good rugby league side these days, aren't they? And New Zealand are pretty good as well, but they've got a great rivalry, and we're going to be playing the Gillaroos in Las Vegas in March next year, the English women, and they face a real big test, I think, and I'm sure they'll rise to it, but it'll be an incredible challenge for them, for the English girls. When you look at the professionalism of the Gillaroos, it's developed quite incredibly.
Yeah. That will be a massive test for the English girls, and we're obviously really looking forward to that one. Fiji, they defeated Cook Islands 18-6, as we just touched on in the women's.
Yeah.
But we might get into some of the talking points in your column this week at Martyn. We had the IMG gradings released. Any big surprises there?
No,
mate?
none whatsoever. 9 grade A's, which congratulations to the teams that have got grade A's who didn't have them in last year's dry run. Obviously, that's Wakefield, Castleford, and Lee. Hull dropped out of the grade A reckonings, so there are only 3 Super League clubs now that don't have a grade A. That's Hull FC, Huddersfield, and Salford. And obviously they were a bit less pleased with the way it all turned out. And there do seem to be some strange anomalies in the way that these gradings are arrived at. The interesting one, though, was London Broncos, who rose from 24th to 14th in the gradings list, having improved their score quite significantly. They've now got a score of 12.65. And it was interesting that the 4 teams immediately outside the top 12 with grade B scores were Toulouse, London, York and Bradford. And those teams, if you look at the top 16 in the league table this year, Super League plus the top 4 in the Championship, it was the same 16 teams. Right. And I've said before, I would go straight to having 16 teams in Super League. Yeah. Obviously, not with 30 games. You would have to grade the games, but to have 16 teams in Super League would be a fantastic thing in my view. Would give a much greater level of variety to the competition and give it much broader appeal in my view. So I would urge that on the RFL and the people who make the key decisions in our sport.
And do you think that these gradings is a sign of potentially expansion to 14 teams for 2026 with the inclusion of London and Toulouse?
Well, Roderick Jones has said that we may well expand in 2026, and I do know that a lot of the clubs, from what I've having spoken to some of them, a lot of the clubs do want to expand to 14 teams to do away with the dreaded loop fixtures, which I think everybody hates actually, and do the game no good whatsoever. So for goodness sake, let's do that. Let's get away from them, and let's have a much broader participation in Super League than we have at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the struggle might be for Toulouse and London is just retaining that score for another year, heading into 2026.
Yeah, it might be. We can only wait and see. I'm very glad to see that Toulouse will be going round again in the Championship next year. They are determined to get into Super League, and I wish them very good luck for doing that, as I do with London as well, of course. But London are in a difficult position. They've got not many players signed on yet for next year, but I hope that they will perform well in the Championship. And the Championship next year, Jake, will be a really interesting competition because, this year we had Wakefield, who were obviously very well resourced and were always going to win everything in the Championship. Next year there isn't a club in that position. So all the clubs that came behind Wakefield in the league table will all believe that they've got a much better chance of doing well next year and winning the grand final. And the real crunch for the grading system is going to come next year when a club like, let's say, Bradford, for sake of argument, a club like Bradford wins the Championship Grand Final, but then is refused entry to Super League. How will that go down?
Yeah.
That's going to be a problem for the game if we're not careful. And I just put the RFL on notice, if they don't realise it already, I'm sure they do, that's going to create a storm next year.
Yeah, absolutely. There's it's sort of like there's no incentive to really do well and go far except for having that achievement.
Well, the incentive is to improve your grading, isn't it? And
that's right.
And as I said in my column this week in a slightly tongue-in-cheek way, St Helens came at the top of the gradings rankings. They overtook Leeds. But for some strange reason, they didn't have a bus tour around St Helens, parading their gradings trophy and, taking the adulation of their fans for being at the number one team in the gradings
what were they thinking?
Table. They've missed
maybe if they
their
were
chance.
to get another point from IMG for doing something like that, maybe they would do it.
Maybe they would, yes.
We'll see.
Absolutely.
The other surprising news this week, mate, there's been a bit of news at Sheffield with Mark Anston being suspended, mate. What are the details of this one?
Well, basically, they played a player against Wigan in the Challenge Cup in March. I think the date was something like March the 22nd. 13 days after he had suffered a concussion against Swinton in a league game. But now, normally, there is an 11-day protocol period. So when 11 days have elapsed, if as a player you've passed all the cognitive tests and so on, then you can play again after 11 days. So technically, the 11 days had passed. But what happened was that the physiotherapist, a guy called Mick Hayes, told Mark Anston on the Thursday, the day before the game against Wigan, which was in the Challenge Cup, that Matty Marsh, the player, would be okay to play. But in fact, what had happened was that the doctor had not signed off. The doctor has to sign some sort of a certificate, it seems, to say that the player is okay to return to action.
Like a medical clearance.
Yeah, like a medical clearance, yeah. Now, the thing that's quite confusing, if you look at the RFL rules on operational rules in this regard, that duty of signing the statement or signing a player off, it is capable of being delegated to another healthcare professional, which in that case would be the physiotherapist, but that delegation hadn't actually been made by the doctor, and apparently the doctor on the morning of the game. Now Mark Anston had not, as I understand it, had any contact with the doctor, and she'd not phoned him to say that Matty Marsh wasn't eligible to play. But what she did do was contact the RFL on the morning of the game and say, look, the problem here, I've not signed this player off. And what I can't understand about this is that, as I understand it, the RFL didn't take action to get in touch with Mark Anston or anybody else at the club to say, look, you can't play this guy because he's actually not been properly signed off. So to cut a long story short, he did play, and he was actually the Sheffield Eagles man of the match. If you look at our report of the relevant League Express back in March, Matty Marsh was Sheffield's best player in that game. Had a very good game. But then, of course, the RFL then subsequently brought a case against Mark Anston, saying that he'd deliberately played a player without satisfying the protocols. Now, you can't deny that Matty Marsh did play, and that he hadn't passed the protocol. So technically they were guilty. But the thing that, I wrote about was not so much whether he was guilty and whether the club was guilty, but whether the punishment of a suspension for 18 months, effectively destroying his career, because that's what it does. It was a tribunal decision passed down by Judge Christopher Batty. and it's effectively destroyed Mark Anston's career as a rugby league coach.
You can't sit that out. You've got to go get another job in another line of work to help support yourself.
Of course. Now the thing is,
from the game.
if Mark Anston had quite clearly deliberately been trying to cheat in this game, then you wouldn't object to the. It's like some people have compared it to the Bloodgate thing in rugby union a few years ago when a coach actually had sort of red ink capsules that they put onto a player's face to bring him off the pitch to substitute somebody else when they otherwise wouldn't be able to do so. That was a clear example of cheating. This is not a clear example of cheating, is it? It's a clear example of not paying as much attention to the regulation as he should have done. But I don't think it's... To me, the correct punishment would have been a reprimand and a warning that any future repetition of what happened would then lead to a significant suspension. But it does seem that the defence at the tribunal asked for a record of the RFL's emails after they got the email from the doctor on the Friday morning, and the RFL didn't reveal what that email trail was. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because it's important for everybody to know that the RFL, took the right action. Well, and if player health is so important, the right action would have been immediately to take action to stop Matty Marsh from playing. And apparently the investigator who spoke to Mark Anston, his notes got lost, so they couldn't be reviewed at the tribunal. But as I understand it, so I think the tribunal decision was very harsh. I can see why they wanted to be harsh. I wouldn't, go out of my way to criticise the judge because it was the whole thing was. Player health was emphasised as being the most important thing, and of course it is. So, but I just think it was too harsh in all those circumstances. What's your view, having heard that?
Yeah, just having heard that, it sounds like there's a number of parties involved here that have failed their due diligence. And,
yes. And
that includes the RFL, because if someone hasn't checked their emails that day for this sort of communication, which I assume would happen on a frequent basis, especially on the weekend.
Well, it was a working day on a Friday. No, it was a Friday.
Okay.
It was a Friday.
I came through, yeah.
Friday morning.
Well, there's no excuse there from the RFL as well. They're also a guilty part in this.
Well, they ought to suspend themselves, perhaps. Yes,
that's right. But yes, very convenient that chain of emails wasn't able to be brought up in the proceedings.
Yeah. Well, we've had we published a very angry letter from a guy called Ian Swire, who is a former chairman of Sheffield Eagles from a few years ago. Really angry is Ian, saying that he's going to take this much further.
Yeah.
And I've been deluged with emails from Sheffield Eagles supporters, making the same point that the punishment is absolutely absurd, and that they've set up a GoFundMe page to help Mark Anston raise the money to take the case to the Sport Resolution and Arbitration Service.
Okay.
And hopefully he will manage to do that, and hopefully we'll succeed in getting the suspension put aside. And I've also spoken to some Sheffield Eagles players, and they are all 100% behind Mark Anston, and they're all quite angry at this decision that's been made.
And it's just frustrating that they've done this to make an example out of him. I think something like a 4 or a 5 match ban would be sufficient.
Of course it would.
Then again, I still think that there's multiple parties who are at fault here as well. So it shouldn't all just be pinned on him, I don't think.
No, absolutely. Well, the physiotherapist, Mick Hayes, has also been suspended for 18 months, but with the suspension beginning, I think, in July, when the club first suspended him. So, but there has been a problem for all parties. And, I think, I'm a great believer in, justice has to be seen to be done. And I don't think it has been in this case. Incidentally, I also think another strange element of this is that the RFL always talks about an independent tribunal. Well, frankly, I wish it would stop saying that. It's an RFL tribunal because the RFL appoints the judge and the fellow members of the panel. So I'm not quite sure how that can be independent when, it wasn't, they appoint them. It wasn't, Mark Anston who appointed them. It was the RFL. So, it's a sort of minor technical point in a way, but I always smile a bit when we talk about independent tribunals.
Yeah, I don't think they've drawn these people out of a hat.
No, they're all, they all serve a, I mean, it's great that the judge and the other members of the, tribunal give their time to make decisions on these things. I think that's admirable. But, it's not tribunal in the strict sense. It's not independent in the strict sense of the word, is it?
Yeah, it's tough. Hopefully they can appeal it and get that suspension
Well, I hope so.
significantly brought down. Although, what other options does Mark have apart from maybe going and coaching in rugby union or something like that?
Well, yes,
but,
yeah.
It's very tough for him.
Who knows? Yeah.
The other big news that's happened over the last few days, mate, is it looks like the Ashes tour is going to be held in England next year rather than in Australia, which was what was originally scheduled or was going to be scheduled.
I'm just sort of thinking now about anybody who booked a trip to Australia next year on the basis that the Ashes are going to be held in Australia.
Yeah.
How must they be feeling if there are such people?
And there may well be the refundable option.
Well, hopefully so. Yeah, hopefully so.
Because that's. I mean, we didn't have the dates locked in, but it's easy for one to look at when the NRL season's going to end and then book, a few weeks in Australia.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
So, but
trip of a lifetime, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's beautiful weather in Australia at that point as you're going into
Absolutely,
summer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess what do you think has inspired them to make this change?
I suppose it's the fact that the World Cup is being held in Australia in 2026, so they don't want two big events, at the same, in successive years, presumably.
Yeah,
that's all I can think. But we'll see. So it's all going to be planned. We'll have to see how it, where they decide to take the test matches and so on, and. How they undertake the planning for that.
And where would your three desired venues be?
I'd definitely go to Newcastle for one game, and I'm not quite sure where I'd go with the others. Actually, I think I'd be tempted to take a game to Hull, because that's always very well supported, and then a game in Lancashire, probably at Wigan, I would imagine. Yeah. And
just don't have any in London.
Well, that's a difficult one because we've lost a bit of ground in London, haven't we? And if we could get the right venue and get the right sort of marketing for a game, I'd certainly go back to London. Yeah. But I'm not sure that will happen. But it might do. Who knows?
Yeah. No, I'm really interested to see what kind of interest from a player perspective that the Australian side gets, because obviously. Yeah, this year they've got a very strong side, but the players like Nathan Cleary are going to be interested in coming
I'm sure
out
they'll be
that.
interested, but the trouble is, so many players have injuries at the end of the season, don't they, that they need to have surgery on. And that's why I'm so keen on making July an international month.
Oh, yeah.
When, it would have more prominence in the middle of the season than it does at the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, mate. In terms of player movements, we've touched on Maika Sivo. Chris Hill's signed with Salford. A good pick-up for Salford in terms of experience and leadership.
In terms of experience, gosh, he couldn't be more experienced, couldn't Chris?
Yeah.
I mean, he's going to turn 37 this weekend.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable, how, he's capable of carrying on. And I'm sure he'll do a good job for Salford. So it's going to be an interesting move for him, isn't it? His career's never going to end.
No, definitely. They'll have to drag him off the field, I'd say, mate. Matty Moylan retires. We've touched on that.
Yeah.
What a tremendous career he's had.
Yes, absolutely.
He showed, I remember back when he first sort of came through the ranks, he had all this promise, but then had a few season-ending injuries in a row that sort of stopped him from playing. But sad for Lee fans that he won't be running around on the pitch next year, but
Sean Johnson is replacement.
Go for Shaun.
Yeah.
Danny McGuire takes over as head coach of Cass.
Yes, I mean, obviously, Craig Lingard, him being sacked was a shock, in my opinion. And, but Martyn Jepson's taken the club over. It's his decision to make now. And Danny McGuire is going to step into the hot seat. And Danny's a very thoughtful... I mean, obviously Martyn Jepson has obviously interviewed Danny, spoken to him and talked through the role, and has obviously been very impressed by him. So I hope it all works well. I'd love to see Danny succeed, and he's going to be supported by Brett Delaney, isn't he, coming from Hull KR. So that's going to be quite an interesting change at Castleford.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they've got their grade A now, and I think they'll be as motivated as ever to stay in that category. So
yeah, and they need to work on replacing that stand at Castleford, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. All right, mate, we'll take a look at this weekend's matchups. Saturday morning, 7 a.m. our time, we've got New Zealand taking on Tonga. Who do you like in this one?
Well, you'd think New Zealand would win, but my gosh, Tonga are going to give them a great game. And with the support they'll get in Auckland, I think that is by no means nailed on for New Zealand. So I think New Zealand should win, but only by about 6 points.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what the crowd looks like. I think it'll probably be 50-50 Tongan fans and New Zealand fans. So.
Yeah, but the New Zealand, the Kiwis do seem to be building up support in New Zealand again, don't they? Especially under Stacey Jones. So, hopefully that will work for them.
Yeah.
Hopefully it'll be another sellout.
No, fingers crossed. Then 2:30 p.m. our time, we've got England taking on Samoa at Headingley. Who do you like in this one, mate?
Well, you've got to like England after last Sunday, but as I say, I think the Samoans will be looking to bounce back from that defeat, and I think they'll make it a closer game, particularly in the first 20 minutes. If England are not winning after 20 minutes, it's going to be quite a tough slog, I think.
Yeah, really looking forward to that one. I think it'll be a tight one. And Sunday morning, 5 a.m. our time, we've got Papua New Guinea taking on the Cook Islands.
There's only one result there, isn't there? Yeah.
PNG by a lot.
By a significant margin, yeah.
But yeah, I think I'll be cheering for the Cook Islands just because of what they've achieved.
I love the Cook Islands.
Yeah, there's still some notable players. We mentioned Isan Masters playing from Brad Takarangi, who's has retired and has sort of come back to play for Cook Islands. So should be a good matchup. But we might look at wrapping things up here, mate. I do notice we've got the new Rugby League World magazine on the table, the grand finals special. Yes,
a great publication, actually, an absolutely great publication. Yeah. And I have an article in this, as always, the final whistle, with me. So it's always, they do a great job, the team, to produce a great Rugby League magazine.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to grab that one, there will be a QR code across the screen for our YouTube viewers. But if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, head along to www.totalrl.com/shop to grab that one.
Absolutely.
And grab yourself a League Express if you're at the shops or see it online.
Yes.
Get an online subscription for that.
First blood to England this week in League Express. Full of interesting reading, I think.
Absolutely. We'll see if Shaun Wane can go 2-0 this week.
Well, he'll be trying.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, mate. We'll wrap it up here and do it again next week.
Great stuff.
Awesome.
Thanks, Jake.
Cheers.